All right, our next speaker is Hannah Crum, and Hannah is new to LiveAware, but she came to me and asked, can I give a talk on kombucha? And kombucha is such a vital thing, and it's becoming pretty mainstream now. And so I said yes, but I think we'll learn. I haven't seen her slides, but I think we'll learn that mainstream isn't necessarily what it all pans out to be. But Hannah is known as the Kombucha Mama. She founded the Kombucha Camp Educational Workshop in 2004 out of her Los Angeles kitchen. She then partnered with her husband, Alex Ligori, to create kombuchacamp.com, the informational site with a mission to change the world one stomach at a time by providing quality information and quality fermentation bacteria and quality customer support. She speaks about kombucha fermentation, the whole process, and she has many videos and blog posts, online support communities, and she's the award-winning bestseller of the Big Book of Kombucha, and she'll have that available and we'll sign it for you afterwards. I believe she also has some culture and some other kombucha pieces to make it all work. So I'm so happy to have you, Hannah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Christina. Hello. I am Hannah Crum, also known as the Kombucha Mama, mother to mazillions of bacteria around the world, and as you'll see, a lot of other things. As mentioned, I started Kombucha Camp out of my home in 2004 because I was frustrated by the lack of quality information about kombucha, and there was a lot of fear around kombucha. And so I just wanted to help people understand the beauty of our culture. I partnered with my husband. So he is the structure-loving bacteria to my wild and crazy yeast, and together we are SCOBY, and we have generated loads of things. We've given birth to many, many babies. One of which is our trade association, Kombucha Brewers International. We started with 40 companies in 2014. We have over 400 members. We're putting on our 7th annual conference and 5th annual trade show. And so we are helping to grow this industry in every way we can. And we do a lot of that through education. So our book, The Big Book of Kombucha, over 150,000 copies in print, bestseller on Amazon. It's people call it the Bible of kombucha. So we basically took over a decade's worth of information, put it into a great book format, and it really becomes the sort of baseline for people. Part of the book launch my husband wanted to do was he created this World Kombucha Day. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to get it launched then. So this year was our inaugural World Kombucha Day. And as we'll learn, kombucha has a legendary origin of 221 BC. That translates to February 21st on the calendar, and you can go online and hashtag World Kombucha Day and just see all of the great posts, all the people who are really excited about sharing this message of kombucha and spreading the love. So as mentioned, our mission is to change the world one gut at a time. We mirror our culture in that we do it in symbiosis through interconnection, and that is exactly what led us to create the trade association to support the industry as a whole. Our motto is trust your gut, because your body is unique to you. And so what works for me may not work for you. And that's, if you were here yesterday and heard Ariane talk about intuitive eating, it's about listening to your body, closing those feedback loops, and finding the foods that really nourish and support you. Our ethics, we're all about quality information, quality supplies, quality support. And we have several philosophies that have grown out of our love of working with kombucha. So healthy boundaries is what creates a healthy culture. And as we know from the microbiome, diversity is key to a healthy ecosystem. And so, we are nature. We can't help but reflect nature in every single way. And, we really learned that when you give an organism what it needs to thrive, it will. So making kombucha at home is really easy, but there are certain parameters we need to follow so that we're honoring the organisms that are making the product, and when we do that, it flourishes. Now apply that to you. When you give you what you need in order to thrive, guess what? You will. And so my kombucha journey began with a single sip. I had never heard of kombucha. I visited a friend from college in San Francisco, so unlike a lot of people who come to kombucha because of a health challenge, I just randomly met this weird blob. I came back to LA, I grabbed a kombucha off the shelf. I was like, oh, there's all these kombuchas here. I'd never seen it before. I had my first sip, and wait, what was your first sip like? What did you do the first time you drank kombucha?
It's fizzy.
It's fizzy.
Just kind of smacked my lips. It was
Smacked your lips, it was fruity. Anyone go kombucha face? Because it is an acetic acid ferment like vinegar, it's a little tangy. For me though, that just, it was the 2000s and I was still very sad, standard American diet. And unbeknownst to me, my body just wasn't used to getting living enzymes or nutrients in a living form. And so that initial sip just really electrified my whole body. Little did I know it would take over my life and become my career. But that's how things work, right? So kombucha for us really is a gateway into learning about fermented foods. It isn't the end point, it's the beginning point of learning all kinds of great things. And we're really passionate about looking to our ancient DNA wisdom, quality over quantity, and bacteria are really amazing. So why do you drink kombucha? Yes?
Pick up slack from gallbladder removal.
Gallbladder removal, it helps with the processing your foods. Anyone else? Yes?
It's a pre and a probiotic for me.
Pre and probiotic? Yep, absolutely. So what you're echoing, of course, are the top 3 reasons that people enjoy kombucha. It improves digestion, it increases energy, and it helps you feel good. Now, also can do a lot of other things for us, and many people think, oh, it's a miracle, it's a cure-all. And then you also hear, oh, it's dangerous and it'll kill you. So we have these sort of 2 extremes of opinions about kombucha. The reality is it's neither. But let's talk about how it's able to help us. So first of all, what is kombucha tea? It's fermented tea. So just like wine is fermented grapes, cheese is fermented milk, kombucha is fermented tea. We use a culture called a SCOBY. So this in the past was called a mushroom, which I consider a term of convenience because it's not actually a mushroom. But this sort of looks like a mushroom cap. If you didn't know what it was and didn't understand there were microscopic organisms creating it, you might think, oh, this looks like a mushroom. So mushroom tea is an old name for kombucha, but there are no mushrooms in it. It is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. It's an acetic acid ferment like vinegar, but whereas vinegar is a 4% minimum acetic acid, 4 to 8%, kombucha is about 0.5% to 1%. So we think of it as easy drinking vinegar. And we consider it 21st century yogurt. Most of us, the room sort of split. Some of us probably remember when you could not buy yogurt in the store and it was a crazy counterculture hippie thing, right? Now it's become mainstream and everybody buys it. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Well, guess what? Kombucha's doing the same thing. Crazy counterculture, hippie thing that is becoming a very popular beverage because of what it can do to help support health. So what are bacteria? They are, as Mark articulated earlier, they are the very first organisms that ever lived on this planet. They have an amazing ability called genetic fluidity, where even if their cell walls rupture, other organisms can come and capture that DNA and evolve them. And this is, in the good way, this is how we have evolution. In the bad way, this is where we see superbugs and how they're able to evolve. But they're incredibly adaptive, and they are literally involved in every single process in life. As you can see here, bacteria have their own family, and as you'll see, we are more closely related to yeast, because we're eukaryotes. But bacteria can live in every single type of environment, from extreme cold to extreme hot and everything in between. There is something living somewhere. And the root word of bacteria is bacchos, which means rod-shaped. And so the first bacteria that people saw under the microscope had that sort of rod shape. And look at us. Aren't we rod-shaped? Aren't we totally tubular? Isn't everything about us a tube? The tube goes in, the tube comes out. Blah, blah, blah. It's one of the many. Because we are living in a bacteria world, and I am a bacteria girl. Ow! Indeed, right? Because we're fun. Bacteria is fun. And again, we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. Our body composition just so happens to reflect the composition of this planet, the amount of water that's in our system, the type of mineral content. This is not an accident. Even the word human derives from humus, which means dirt or earth. We literally come from the dirt, and we have evolved into these amazing creatures. And so just as these cycles in life occur, so do too our cycles here as human beings. We are bacterial sapiens, because this was a term that we came up with thinking that it really encapsulated the relationship that human beings have with bacteria. Once we started learning about the human microbiome a decade ago, in 2010, it started to make sense how vital it was to honor the bacteria. You know, we've been waging germ warfare for a really long time. And even though tricycline is now considered banned by the FDA, people still, you'll see it everywhere, these hand sanitizers that actually aren't that great, because while they'll kill some bacteria, they allow the resistant bacteria to continue to evolve and get stronger. And humans and bacteria co-evolved. We have, you know, I'm figuring out my buttons here, but who remembers Pigpen? He always had a little cloud of dirt around him. The reality is we have a cloud, but it's not dirt, it's bacteria. And so everywhere you go, you have this force field. Now imagine your force field has been weakened. Of course, it's going to be more difficult to protect yourself because your force isn't strong enough. And how do we do that? We do that by increasing what we're putting into our body. And, you know, our gut instinct is potentially bacteria communicating with you, right? Sometimes you meet someone and you're like, oh my God, we could be best friends. Like we're jiving, we're jamming on all these levels, and you hardly know each other. Other times you meet someone and you're like, ugh, I get a weird feeling from this person. In your mind, you might go back and say, oh, well, this and this and this and this, but perhaps it was your gut bacteria sensing the bacteria of these other people, right? Bacteria have very specific relationships. We have pathogens, we have parasites, and we have commensal organisms. And so your body is likely sensing or picking up on something that is really at that subtle level that you don't know. So just like our planet, we have a wide variety of temperature zones and climates on our body, right? We have our dry skin, we have our moist armpits, we have very damp lady bits and man bits, and everything in between. And so just like there are different types of organisms that live in different climates, the same is true of our bodies. And so what's in our gut may not be what's on our skin, and that's why it's really important we're paying attention to putting the right organisms in the right place. As mentioned, they literally do everything we need in order to survive. They digest our food. They digest us after we die. They help our immune system. They extract additional nutrients from our foods. And in fact, fermentation can be thought of as digestion that occurs outside of the body. So imagine you've got these bacteria doing the work for you. When you then consume those products, how much easier it is for your body to uptake those nutrients because they're already broken down into a smaller format. And so as my husband says, symbiosis does not mean kumbaya. It does mean healthy competition. And as I was saying, think about it like this. If pathogens were so strong, we'd all already be dead. Right? So clearly there are far more good guys than there are bad guys. And by their nature, pathogens are weak. And this applies to pathogenic people, pathogenic policies, and we need the vinegar of truth. We need the light, right? Like the light shines out the mold and kills the mold and dries it up. We need the light of truth, the vinegar of truth. And what I mean by that is sometimes that vinegar is hard to handle. But what it does is it cuts through those weak pathogenic ideas and helps us to realize that, you know, we really need to support life on this planet, which is an incredible self-healer, and we'll all be able to heal from that. So these are just some of the ways in which gut bacteria impacts that brain-body connection. So a lot of people will say the gut's the second brain. I disagree. It's the first brain. Because when this is out of order, so is this. And it's not that there isn't a two-way communication, but how do you start healing this? By healing your gut first. And so really being focused on our gut health and paying attention to the nutrients we're putting into our body. And it's not to say you can't have some junk food every once in a while. Sure, it's all about balance, right? It's not about eating a perfect diet or being orthorexic or being so caught up on like, am I having the perfect foods? It's more like paying attention to the balance. How does your body feel when you consume these foods? And allowing your body to gradually let go of the things that it doesn't need. But when you see all of the things that having a healthy biome can help you heal from, it does seem like fermented foods are a miracle food. As mentioned before, ancient wisdom. Human beings have known this stuff forever, right? When we live closer to the earth, we couldn't help but be in tune. We couldn't help but listen to our instincts. We couldn't help but understand that these things were incredibly vital. What has happened, of course, is we've become divorced from the earth. We live in cities, we drive cars, and I'm not advocating we go back to living in dirt huts, but being conscientious of how we need to incorporate nature into our lives on a regular basis helps us to maintain those connections that we need. And, you know, all disease begins in the gut. This is where it happens. Why? Because this is where our immune system happens. That's why it's so weird to me that we would ever inject something into our bloodstream as opposed to take it orally, which is where you're, you know, this is why babies are constantly sticking stuff in their mouth. This is their immune system. They're building their immunity by putting things in their mouth, and they're also experiencing the world. So this is where your immunity starts. And where did we get our original bacteria? So they used to say that the womb was sterile. Of course, we know now that's not true. Nothing is sterile. There's bacteria everywhere. But one of the first ways that a child receives its first inoculation or its first immunization of sorts is by coming through the birth canal. And certainly C-sections can be a vital procedure when it's for a medically necessary condition. However, all too often for the convenience of doctors, people are scheduling their birth as if it's just another appointment as opposed to allowing the body to go through that natural process. And the problem with that, though, as we mentioned before, is there's different types of bacteria that live on your skin versus inside that vaginal canal. And when you take the baby this way, it doesn't get that initial inoculation because the biome of the vagina changes immediately as soon as a woman gets pregnant. It starts changing the pH and the acids and the makeup so that it has the bacteria that inoculate the child so they can digest breast milk. And so when you don't have that and instead you have skin organisms colonizing the child at first, their immunity is weakened, they have more allergies, asthma, and things like this. What's really great is we're now seeing the understanding of how vital it is that we do this, and so you'll have, in the right places, you will have a swab of that vaginal canal that then is rubbed on the child after a C-section. So there are ways that we can ensure that they're getting that initial inoculation, even if, for medical reasons, they're not able to. But look at this, right? Wet nurses. It was very common for other women to breastfeed other women. Unfortunately, this was a characteristic of slavery where mammies were forced to raise and feed and nourish the children of the slave owners versus their own children. But the reality is this idea of, you know, putting a child on somebody else's breast isn't actually so weird or awkward. We, of course, have so many hang-ups about breastfeeding and sexuality in this country that, you know, we even sexualize breastfeeding, which is completely weird. Just because they're boobs doesn't mean that they're just for sex, right? In fact, most of the time they're not. And so this idea that, you know, touching each other, sharing bacteria is really vital. Grooming each other, touching each other, physical touch. Touch is such an incredible stress reliever when it's healthy and safe and done in a non-threatening manner. And I really feel like non-threatening, non-sexual human touch is a missing element in our society today, and it makes us feel isolated. Now imagine when you have that kind of safe, healthy touch, when you feel stress, pain demands to be recognized. Pain demands to be heard. And when we ignore it, that's when we are harming our bodies the most. But when you go, like, anyone ever get waxed? This might be an extreme example, but you get waxed and immediately she touches the area where she just yanked all your hair out. Why? Because putting that pressure on that painful spot actually minimizes the pain. So pain demands to be acknowledged, it demands to be touched, and it demands to be recognized. And when we're able to do that, and when we're able to lovingly touch each other and care about each other, we all become healers. We all have the capacity to heal others simply by channeling love through our bodies. Amen. Praise the love. So how do we cultivate our inner terroir? The 5 Ks, kombucha, kraut, kvass, kefir. What do they all start with K for? Do they all have vitamin K? Maybe. Words are pretty amazing, and they tell us different things. But look, eat dirt. Kids instinctually put lacto organisms, soil-based organisms in their mouth. And as long as it's not in an environment where there's been glyphosate and toxic fertilizers used, that's perfectly safe and healthy. That's exactly what we're looking for when we're fermenting the kraut, when we're making the kvass. Those soil-based organisms live on the skins of these vegetables, and that's what ends up turning into the probiotics in those foods. Prebiotics, as Mark also mentioned, are incredibly crucial, and kombucha has both prebiotics as well as probiotics. And so not only does it help organisms flourish, but it gives them the food they need in order to be sustained as well. Let's see. There's so much on here. And then gardening, of course, getting out in nature. But mono anything is anti-nature. Do you ever walk outside your door and see one type of flower, one type of bird, one type of tree? No. Why? Because nature is diverse. It has to have this plethora. And that's where monoculture, monocropping, these things are anti-nature. And so when I'm talking about re-evolution, which is revolution with a capital E, we're looking at nature and how nature works and then applying that wisdom to our modern system. So some of you might have seen, I'm kind of going to mess up the name, the Greatest Little Farm, or about Apricot Lane Farms and how they farm in this very biodynamic way where they're following the contours of the earth and they're mixing. Even the regenerative agriculture where you have the cows eating the grass and pooping in the grass and the chickens come and clean it up, and the rotation of this thing. This is following nature, and what we see are far better outcomes. We're rebuilding the soil. We're putting the bacteria back into the soil as opposed to just take. This rapacious way in which we have approached food has really been, I mean, think about it. You're eating the product of something that comes out of this, over-chemicalized process. Of course you can't feel good from eating that food. And that's why knowing your farmer, knowing where your products are coming from, or at least choosing manufacturers who care about these things is so important. As you guys already know, and we've had loads of presentations here talking about it, like the water's already boiled. The frogs are boiling. Like, we're not waiting for that to happen. It's already happening. The canaries are now kids, and that is the scariest thing about what is happening in this country. It is as if we are being subjugated to chemical companies who literally do not care about our health outcomes. And we are being forced to take on all of these chemicals in the United States because our government will not regulate them. And we see the rollbacks with the EPA, we see the weakening of organic standards, and all of these have a cumulative negative impact on our bodies. And so this is why it's so crucial that we're thinking about the quality of our foods. And I get it, quality food sometimes costs more. But what costs more ultimately? Your health or what you choose to put into your sacred temple? So how does kombucha work with all of this? Not only does it have good bacteria and yeast, it has nutrients in a living form, plus the organic acids created by kombucha are really what make it special. Specifically, it helps to detoxify the liver. It supports a healthy liver. Our liver creates glucuronic acid. When that acid bonds with a toxic molecule, that bond cannot be broken. And then through hydrolysis, which is a fancy way of saying we pee it out, we release those toxins. And so regular consumption of kombucha over time helps your body to gradually clean out those waste products, because when the liver gets overloaded, those toxins get sequestered into your fat cells. And so then you're just sitting on this mountain of toxins that you don't even realize you've accumulated over time. And so it's not one bad meal or one exposure that potentially causes the damage, but it's those multiple repeated exposures over time. And so drinking kombucha and keeping calm is really the way to go. So why is kombucha amazing? Well, tea is the key, right? Tea already has so many polyphenols, antioxidants. It's been shown to help lower cholesterol, to help with weight management, and lengthen life, anti-cancer, etc. So we're starting with something that's already amazing and good for us. When we ferment it, we make it easier for us to absorb those nutrients. Okay, who likes my vital nutrients up here? Alcohol, sugar. I know, you guys are thinking, wait, everyone's going dry, everyone's anti-sugar, what the heck are you talking about? Okay, well, let's get specific. What are we talking about? I'm talking about alcohol that comes from traditional fermentation. Every type of fermentation creates alcohol. Why? When you get a wound, you rub rubbing alcohol on the wound because it's naturally antimicrobial. Creating alcohol is the way in which yeast evolved to protect itself from invasion from other organisms. That sweet tea is delicious to lots of things, including mold, but that alcohol prevents it from being able to grow. In addition to that, alcohol reduces stress. It allows you to absorb nutrients more easily. And so when I'm talking about alcohol, I'm not talking about distilled alcohol or alcohol that's been pasteurized and denatured where you're not getting all of those nutrients in living form. I'm talking about very low alcohol in trace amounts from your fermented foods. Sugar. Are we talking about aspartame? Are we talking about monk fruit? Are we talking about extremely processed products that don't have a nutritional benefit to our bodies? Are we talking about a grass that humans have been cultivating for over 5,000 years? And yes, there's a processing to it, but your body craves sugar, and when we break that sugar down into its smaller components, you take it from a higher glycemic load to a lower glycemic impact. Now, the unfortunate thing is when you're looking at the label for kombucha and you're looking at those sugars, you might think those sugars are equivalent to sugars in soda, but they're not because they're already pre-digested, they're fermented to the lower glycemic load, and that teaspoon of sugar is what helps the medicine go down. Bioavailable nutrients, so again, these aren't necessarily there in massive doses, but look at this shape. That is the shape found in nature. Whenever you try to make synthetic nutrients in a lab, it does not have this shape. The shape is slightly altered. So we think of these shapes as keys. When you put a key that fits the slot, it turns immediately. You can uptake those nutrients instantly. When the key doesn't quite fit, your body doesn't totally know what to do with it. And unfortunately, what we've seen are folks who thought supplements would help them with certain issues, B12 being one of them, that in fact their body can't process it, or it has to be methylated, right? There's all these like nuances to it. But when we're getting our nutrients in a living form, even if it's in trace amounts, that far outweighs the supplement. Now, it's not to say there isn't a place for supplements. Of course, we're all suffering from weakened immune systems, and so it's finding the things that really work with your body. But the more we get this from our food, the healthier we feel. Kombucha is not a cure. It's not. What it does is it brings balance back to your body, it strengthens your immune system so it can do what it's supposed to do, which is protect you. What's really exciting is I've long asserted that kombucha is an adaptogen, and at KombuchaCon this year, we have the second iteration of a study that was started last year that shows kombucha prevents the body from experiencing negative impacts of stress when it's consumed and then humans are exposed to a stress test. Now, the inflammation still occurs. Inflammation isn't all necessarily bad. Inflammation is a sign that your body is doing what it's supposed to. However, the kombucha is being shown to prevent the body from having a negative impact as a result of that stress. So we're really excited to see more research and more science validating that which we already understand to be true. Which leads me to just say one thing. I need a sip of water. Scientific method. It's a method of evaluating things with a hypothesis. Science is not a religion. The science is not settled. Yes, we might see the same results again and again, and then we might think, okay, science has demonstrated that this phenomena occurs as a result of this hypothesis or whatever. But the reality is the reason why we study stuff in the first place is because the phenomena already exists. So people want to say, oh, well, there's hundreds of years of anecdotal information about kombucha helping with all of these ailments, but we have no proof. Like, people, the proof is in the phenomena. The phenomena already exists. What hasn't caught up is the reason to invest money into the scientific method to validate why or how kombucha creates this impact. But this idea that we can't look at anecdotal evidence or at least figure out some way to quantify it is kind of ridiculous in my mind because it's the whole reason why we actually study stuff in the first place. This is our nature, guys. Diversity. And when it comes to the human culture, diversity of ideas, diversity of ways of living. And as long as we're exerting healthy boundaries and we respect people, you and I can have different values and different opinions and vote for different people. But as long as we still treat each other with respect, that's what's important. And that is what is missing. We are a nation inflamed. People are poisoned on a regular basis. They're consuming foods that they're told are low fat or healthy or low salt. Their bodies are messed up. Their brains are messed up. Now you put them in this echo chamber of insanity called Facebook. This is why we are experiencing so much intense emotion around this. And so I truly believe we need a national heal in. We need to get healthy foods to people in underserved communities or overserved communities. We just need to help people get healthy so that they can come back into their sanity, right? Sane means healthy at the root of it. And so if we're not healthy, we can't make healthy decisions or choices. And while, again, we may not agree on things and we might have different values, if we're sane, I truly believe that we are going to make choices that support life and love, because that's what humans really are beings of life and love. All right. Any questions thus far? Woo! Kombucha party. All right, I got another song for you. Once you learn this song, you'll never forget how to make kombucha. It goes like this. Kombucha tea, easy as 1, 2, 3. Brew sweet tea, add a SCOBY, wait a week, and then repeat. Woo! That's it, guys. I was a terrible cook. I couldn't cook anything. I was eating processed foods, but you know what I could do? I could boil water. And that's really all you need to know how to do to make kombucha. If you can brew a cup of tea, you can make kombucha. We dissolve our sugar in there. We add our SCOBY. Waiting a week is subjective. Again, we want to have the right temperature conditions, the right time frame in order to create the flavor profiles that we love. But love is that secret ingredient that nourishes the soul. I see there's a question. Yes?
Hannah, recently I learned, I don't know if it's true, but it was from a reliable source, that the water on the outside of the bubbles in kombucha is structured water. Do you know anything about that?
I haven't heard that. That sounds fascinating. But I will say this, so there's carbonation and there's effervescence, and what we have in kombucha and all fermented foods, and really, that root word for yeast means to boil, because when ancient man went to look at their ferments, what did they see? Bubbles on the top, just like they saw when they boiled water, even though they weren't boiling water. And fermentation creates heat. And so the bubbles are really vital. I truly believe that human beings are hardwired to seek out bubbles, because we've known through our DNA wisdom, that nutrition is present. The problem is we have simulacrum. We have bait and switch, right? So sodas are fake fermented drinks. They use fake acids that deplete the body to mimic the real acids. They have to put a ton of sugar in it just to get you to drink it. And then they add carbonic acid as a fake carbonation. But when you have that effervescence, like a lot of people who say they can't handle carbonation, try natural effervescence. I think you'll really like it.
Yes, I was wondering about the types of sugar you could use. Could you use honey? Could you use Manuka sugar? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, sure. So fermentation is flexible technology, right? That's what's really cool about it. Again, we want to learn the rules so then we know how to break them. So you always want to keep a mother in tea and sugar as sort of that traditional substrate for them. From there, you can take any type of herb, any type of sugar you want, and make experimental batches. So we've seen yerba mate kombucha, coffee kombucha, jun, which is kombucha's raw honey cousin, and things like that.
What about licorice root or cinnamon?
Sure, but keep in mind, some of these herbs will have essential oils that will inhibit SCOBY growth or are antimicrobial, and that's why we always just want to use an extra. Because the culture is so prolific, we're always going to have extras we can do experiments with, but always make sure you keep your one mother safe so that way she can make more mothers if your SCOBY doesn't reproduce. Yes?
I have a question. So I just want to better understand the sugar
Yeah.
aspect. So for people with cancer that are really trying to avoid sugars, I'm confused how, we're adding sugar, the SCOBY eats it, how much of it is left, how much is fermentation, and then when you look at the label on kombucha bottles, there's 13 grams of sugar. The variation is quite large, so I'm just curious how.
Which is why making yourself will always give you the most control. How do you know enough of the sugar's been fermented out? You taste it. Your taste buds are your very best guide. And some people will find when they first start making kombucha, it's a little sweeter, but they start to crave those acids because your body really wants those acids. Bitter and sour are the flavors of health and digestion. I'm not saying those are the only flavors we should have, but those are the ones that help keep our body in balance. And in fact, a lot of people find when they start drinking kombucha, it improves, they reduces their cravings for sugar, it reduces their cravings for alcohol because they're getting those nutrients in a format that their body can utilize. But to your point about cancer or diabetes, those are people who want to make a really sour kombucha because that way they know more of the sugar has been fermented out of it. Regarding the sugar label, there's not much we can do. The FDA decides what we're allowed to put on there. And so, right now we don't break out fructose, glucose, sucrose. So it just gets lumped as sugars. The other problem is, even though our sugars are fermented and that number you're seeing on the label is after fermentation, it has to be called added sugars, even if no additional sugar is added to the secondary fermentation process. So again, because the FDA doesn't fully acknowledge that fermentation process, we have to work with that language. But it doesn't mean that they're adding extra sugar unless, of course, they're putting juice or some other flavoring in there.
Okay, so just to be clear, so the best way to avoid a high sugar content would be to make it yourself.
Yes.
And then taste it
Yes.
for when it's more vinegary or less
Exactly
sweet.
right.
So in that, that fermentation process, the breakdown of the sugar, it's no longer there?
It's not no longer there. It's been broken into a smaller format, which is
Okay.
then the microorganisms can consume. So what happens is sucrose is a disaccharide. It's a molecule of two sugars bonded together. The yeast break that bond with an invertase, with an enzyme. Then it becomes those monosaccharide components, fructose and glucose. Glucose is what makes our glucuronic acids, and so glucose is consumed by the bacteria. The fructose and glucose are also consumed by the yeast, but you will have some of those elements remaining at the end of the process. And because, again, they've been broken into those monosaccharide components, they have that lower impact on your body. And again, anecdotally and through rat studies, we've seen that diabetics can reduce, and even people's stories, they can reduce insulin consumption as a result of including kombucha in their diet. Now, again, I'm not saying this is for everybody. Trust your gut, listen to your body, work with your practitioner to make sure that it's the right choice for you.
Thank you.
So you said something really interesting about additives like cinnamon. I love the healing properties of essential oil, and I was wondering if I started making kombucha, what would happen if you put therapeutic grade oils in? Is that something you should add after the fermentation process?
Yes, so flavoring typically happens after. So we actually have sort of 3 stages of fermentation. The primary is the mother with the tea and sugar. Secondary is where we might add flavorings and put it in the bottle and infuse some fizz, or if you're not going straight from there, like the commercial producers, right? You don't see bunches of fruit pieces and stuff floating in the bottle. That's because they've gone a third phase. So they'll flavor it for a couple of days, take those flavoring agents out, and then put it in the bottle and let it do a tertiary fermentation to build natural effervescence. Now, commercial producers will also add some CO2 because they're trying to yield a consistent product for consumers. So you'll often find a mix of both in there.
So you're saying that it would be better, so if you do your tea, you're fermenting, after you're done fermenting, you would add this.
Exactly right, because we don't want to harm our mother. So the secondary phase, the mother's gone. There may still be a little bit of antimicrobial impact there, depending on the type of oil, but you'll also get the benefits of both.
Yes, I'm wondering also, back to sugar, have you ever tried doing it with maple syrup? Have you done it with coconut sugar, date sugar?
So let me just mention, some of these sugars you're mentioning are very mineral rich, and what happens is they overstimulate the yeast, which then causes it to sour more quickly. So if you are experimenting with these other types of sugars, you either want to use a little less, combine it with some sucrose, and remember, things like agave are just fructose. So you're not going to make those G-forming acids if you're only using a fructose instead of, but some people will use dextrose, which is all glucose, and then you get more of those G-forming acids. But in terms of the palm sugars and things like this, they have a higher mineral content, which causes it to sour more quickly. So just make sure you're tasting more frequently. Sour's good, yeah. And if it's too sour, you can always dilute it with a little bit of water because sometimes it's too intense or our friends think it smells weird. Put a little water and kombucha together. It shifts the pH. It makes it more palatable. It's easier to go down. Or mix it with their diet soda. Come on, guys, you got to start somewhere. Slip it in. if someone's addicted, that's what I'm talking about. If someone's addicted, mix it with the soda so that way they're starting to get some of those nutrients and gradually get them off. So
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
My question is, when and how is the best way to drink the kombucha drink to get the most benefit?
Here we go. So first thing in the morning on an empty stomach helps you feel how the kombucha works in your system. So this is a way of learning how to close that feedback loop. Again, as Ariane talked about yesterday, so often if we're in a state of stress and we're eating food, that stress can't be absorbed properly because the blood is somewhere else in our body, and so we can't digest it. And so when you have this first thing in the morning and you notice how it makes your body feel. So for me, if I have it first thing in the morning, within like a few minutes, my gut relaxes. Like, how often do you feel your gut relax, right? Like, so when you start to pay attention to the subtle signs of how your body's interacting with foods, this is what can help you then as you cultivate this practice to figure out what foods actually nourish me. Or after I eat this food, do I suddenly have phlegm in the back of my throat? Like, what are the little signs of agitation? Like, I know I'll eat In-N-Out burger. It's not the best, but at least it's not been frozen. But that soybean oil will give me a little thing in the back of my throat. So again, it's not about perfection. It's just about making the better, best choices whenever you can. Did that answer your question? Okay, and then there's more. Dilute with water, small frequent doses, soda substitute. But people will drink anywhere from 4 ounces a day to a gallon a day. And so again, your body, you do what makes you feel good. You do what your organism tells you to do. So 7-day kombucha challenge. I highly recommend this. Swap out your soda, your coffee. Again, it's only 7 days. You can have it back, I promise. But swap it out and just see if you drink kombucha instead of those other beverages, how does it make you feel? That's a way that you can, again, experience the phenomena of the kombucha working in your body to see, is this something that helps support my health? Again, we always have people and considerations. I don't know when it became pregnant women couldn't eat anything. It's really weird to me. But in any case, we have pregnant women, women who love kombucha, got pregnant, can't stand the smell of it. It's your body saying, not for me right now. Other women said they craved it all through their pregnancy. And of course, the trace amounts of B vitamins is going to help with the nausea. It's going to help with the constipation, going to help with the digestion. So there's a lot of ways that kombucha can support a healthy pregnancy. Same with breastfeeding. It helps to lower the milk and make it easier to breastfeed. So again, it's listening to your body and figuring out what's right for you in terms of your consumption. Now, some folks do have histamine allergy, and that means they need to heal their gut before they can consume kombucha. So you might consider milk kefir or water kefir or something else that's going to have a different type of impact on the body, and then come back to the kombucha later. So kombucha is not for everybody, right? Just like, people are allergic to shrimp. Some are allergic to strawberries. But you don't see people saying, don't eat these foods, right? It's, again, everybody has to listen to how it makes them feel. Oops. Yes. They drink it straight. You can dilute it. But yeah, they are thirsty for kombucha. I have seen more than one baby get some kombucha and then cry when there's no more because they really love it. Again, they're trusting their guts. Right? Like a baby's instinct is to live, is to thrive. We feel a lot of pressure to feed them certain things or at certain times, but the reality is they're going to eat and make sure that they're sustained and nurtured because that's the normal human instinct.
You don't think there's any reason to be concerned about alcohol?
Not at all, because again, the trace amounts of alcohol don't have a negative impact on the body. I mean, honestly, if it were really a problem, we'd already be seeing drunk kids all the time because so many people homebrew kombucha and give it to their children, and we simply don't hear that because it isn't actually an issue. Because the 0.5% was for taxation purposes and was not based in any sort of scientific study about what the human body can tolerate. But of course, trying to educate people after hundreds of years of thinking that that's the safe level is one of the challenges I'm up for. Yes?
I think you might have answered some of this, but is there ever anything that you should not combine kombucha with?
I mean, people make coffee kombucha. But not that I can think of. Milk. I mean, people do. There's also research studies showing you can take the SCOBY and ferment milk with it. So, I mean, flexible technology. It can really do almost anything. Yes.
I'd like to know how you make the SCOBY.
So the SCOBY, you get one from the batch before. So it does require a starter. Sometimes you can take a bottled kombucha and grow a SCOBY from it. The thing to remember there is while that'll be great for certain brands, other brands it won't work with. The other thing to think about is because of this alcohol, this artificial alcohol issue, sometimes they have to filter it, and so you won't have the same makeup as you would if you're getting an authentic SCOBY. So we've had plenty of people grow SCOBYs. They come and get one of ours, and they're like, "Oh, well, yours tastes a lot better. It just works a lot better because it's an authentic SCOBY that's never been filtered or things like that."
Now, when you get
Lots of hands, yes.
an authentic SCOBY, it's got to be in. The SCOBY or even the kombucha has to be kept inside glass, not plastic, correct? So it can breathe.
Well, that's when you're making it, yeah. When we ship them in plastic, but that's because they're in there temporarily just to get to you. It would be cost prohibitive to ship everything in glass. Plus, kombucha is more mobile than water, which means it leaks. But that said, yes, ideally you want an inert material, so whether that's stainless steel that's 304 grade or higher, which is corrosive resistant to acetic acid in much stronger strengths than what we're brewing, whether that is food grade plastic, we see plenty of producers use food grade plastic, or glass, those are going to be your best materials, porcelain, things like that, as long as they're food safe.
Does it work with copper?
I don't know. Yeah, I've not tried that. I feel like copper is more reactive and you want an inert material.
What about the caffeine? Is the caffeine consumed like the sugar?
It is, yeah. So just as we saw on that tree, yeast and humans are very close to each other. So just like caffeine stimulates our nervous system, it stimulates the yeast. And it's part of what drives that fermentation process forward. So obviously, if they're getting stimulated by the caffeine, that means they're processing it. And so really the energy that people get out of kombucha is not caffeine related. It's related to improved digestion. Right, think about that Thanksgiving dinner you had, and if you didn't have any fermented chutney or anything with it, you're like, oh, you're a lump on the couch. All the blood is right here. When you consume fermented foods, this is why they were our condiments. They were the things we had on the side. We ate fermented foods with every meal to help improve digestion, which then frees up energy so that your body can do the things it needs to do. And the B vitamins. So many people will say, oh, I felt a little drunk from drinking kombucha, but in reality, they were not intoxicated, they were not impaired, and gosh darn it, sure didn't last long enough. And people who get B vitamin shots report that same feeling. So is it a niacin flush that's happening? Are you intoxicated? Again, you have to make that decision for yourself.
I think my question may have been answered. I wanted to know where to get a really good starter SCOBY.
Yes, we are
great.
bacteria farmers. We sell kits and cultures, and we we use all organic ingredients. But yeah, here, let's see what else we got. The book has book signing immediately following the talk, 400 pages. It's really awesome. And then, yes, we would love for you to support our small family business. You know, there's a lot of people selling cheap SCOBYs out there. That's life. Sometimes we make bottom line decisions, but hopefully you go to our website and see all the great information we're doing for free. You align with our mission, and that makes you want to purchase our products. And I can tell you this, we will always support you. The phone number goes right to my cell phone, and if I'm not available, you leave a message, we'll call you back. We call everybody back. So it really is a unique experience to work with Kombucha Camp in that way. And those were some of the resources for the study information. Any other questions? Yes, Mark.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I've been watching and loving you for 15 years, and you are a bacteria-saving, educating rock star. Just want you to know that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
And to step out, do you ship SCOBY?
Worldwide, all over the world. And then we also have helped many producers start their production, scale their production. We're consultants to the industry. You know, a fermentation business is a great idea. Labor of love, emphasis on the labor. So it's not an easy business. But if you feel motivated or have a passion to help others in your community, it can be a really great opportunity. Yes.
I was wondering, sometimes both my husband and I get headaches after drinking kombucha. Do you think that's possibly a histamine allergy?
It could be. Again, every body is different. You could try diluting it and see if that helps. Are you buying the kombucha or you're making it?
Buying.
Yeah, so it could be you might want to shift your brand, because that's the neat thing about kombucha. It's a craft beverage, which means everybody's making it a little bit different. And that means they all taste a little bit different too. So if something's not resonating with you, you might just try another flavor brand or try making it yourself.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And as I mentioned, and she mentioned as well, she has books and other goodies over in the exhibitor hall. And then I also wanted to say that Real Food Bay Area, which is a company that I run, we have some kombucha from Three Stone Hearth, which is a local community kitchen. And my daughter is running the thing today, but we're actually going to sell glasses of it. So if you want just a glass and don't want a whole
delicious
bottle of it, you can just get a glass of it today.
Okay, last thing before we go. So you might have saw earlier on the slides, common immunity, common immunity, community. We need to hug, we need to kiss, we need to shake hands. And so now in the honor of community and interconnectedness, we will make a giant human SCOBY. It doesn't have to be a circle, but it probably will end up that way, no worries. And again, this is safe, non-threatening, healthy human touch.
And I'm the only guy in the room. Oh. Come on up. Good job, Anna.
So now we put our SCOBY principles in action here. This is symbiosis. This is interconnectedness. And now it took us a minute, so let's take a minute. This right here, this is how we change the world. Like minds, like hearts, like passions, you showed up today. You decided to be here, to get this information, to do this for yourself. And when we come together at that grassroots level and we find those who support our ethics and our beliefs, and we put those people in positions of power to help us, this is how we save the world. This is how we save ourselves. And so I'm so grateful that all of you showed up here today to be part of this community, this message. I just want to remind you to trust your gut.
Yay. Thank you.
Woo! All right, hugs, handshakes, book signings, those are all out there.